hello everyone. Welcome back to episode 36 of Talkoffamepod. I'm Kylie. Today we have on the amazing digital host and reporter for New York Yankees and host of the Towing the Slab, Justin Shackill. Thanks so much for coming on, Justin. I'm so happy to have you on.
Thank you so much, Kylie. I appreciate you inviting me on your show. Thank you.
Of course. So as I kind of mentioned a little bit, you are the host of Towing the Slab. What made you kind of want to start being part of that?
So Towing the Slab is a very niche baseball podcast, and it's a podcast that centers around the art of pitching. And I host it with one of the best pitchers from the late 80s and throughout the 90s, David Cone. He's a Cy Young Award winner. He's a five-time world champion with the New York Yankees, with the Toronto Blue Jays. So it's Towing the Slab, pitching with David Cone. We have a master researcher and James Smythe as well. And we're doing it as part of John Boy Media. And if you're a baseball fan, you by now, over the last few years, from the work they've done and the way they've kind of shaken up the baseball industry, you know about John Boy Media. So we like to have a lot of fun. We like to educate, we like to inform our listeners, but overall we like to entertain, and we do it by chatting about pitching each and every week. We have great guests on, and for me, I'm a baseball junkie, and more specifically, I love the art of pitching. So this is a dream come true for me to be able to chat up about pitching every single week with a guy that I grew up watching in David Cone, and he was on my team. I grew up a Yankee fan, so it's so much fun, and it's definitely making the offseason move by pretty quickly here.
Yeah, for sure. Like, as people we were talking about before we started, like I'm a baseball junkie, as you said. Like I'm a baseball junkie as well. All I do is watch baseball. Like all I do is talk about or watch baseball. That's my basically everything that I do. Like every time someone asks me what I'm doing, I'm basically watching baseball. Like either way, I grew up with atmosphere of baseball and growing up always at the field, watching my brother play or me having my own baseball game I played a couple years back. And so I'm always at the field practicing or whatever it is. But like David Cone is one of the best like kind of pitchers back in the 80s, 90s, and one of the best like to ever do it. Like what is it like kind of to do the podcast with him and everything?
It's wonderful because, yeah, he has so many credentials as a former pitcher, but especially where the game of baseball is right now, with so much technology involved, and there's so much of a focus on what some of these front offices are trying to do in terms of finding that next edge. And a lot of it's computerized. So much technology, like I said, is involved. David, even though he comes from the quote unquote old school, he does a terrific job of bridging the gap, teaching fans, listeners, and anyone who's just interested in how the game is played today. He does a great job of just bridging that gap between some modern analytics and modern measurements that are being used in front offices around the game today, and mixing it with the heartbeat of an athlete, because you can never dismiss what is going on with with a human. And look, these aren't chess pieces on a chessboard that are taking the field on a baseball field during a game. These are human beings, so you definitely have to weigh in that heartbeat of an athlete. And David, unlike anybody else in terms of talking about the sport today, does a terrific job of blending those two elements together.
Yeah, absolutely. The sense like baseball is like one of the like hardest sports to play. Like it's one of the hardest sports to play. Baseball and like people like baseball is harder than it actually looks, as I say.
Yes,
And so
absolutely.
with the lockout, players are unable to access facilities, like they can't really do anything. There are no signings. Like we'll be lucky if we be back by spring training. If we're lucky, because since there hasn't been no progress. There was a meeting last night and there was no progress at all, and probably there's not going to be any progress for the next probably couple of months or weeks. You may never know what's going to happen, but I'm hoping to get news back because I kind of want to see some signings.
Definitely. And the frustrating part with all of this is so many of us who kind of are involved in the game somehow, you work as an executive, or maybe you're on the player agent side, or me, I work in the media. so many of us got into working to baseball because we're fans of the game. We're not fans of labor law and stuff like that, which is currently going on. So it's a lot of it is a little difficult to try and wrap your mind around all of the stuff that's being talked about right now. But bottom line is it comes down to the business side of the sport. And look, the way everything's kind of evolved over time, baseball is a business now. And yeah, what you're seeing is a lot of negotiating and I don't even know if we're negotiating on some individual elements. I think we're still in the phase where you have the league, the owners, and then the Players Association still kind of negotiating leverage at this point. It's all a business tactic. So this is like business tactics, business ethics, what we're seeing right now. I'm a little more optimistic than a lot of people that you probably talk to in baseball circles. I think when it gets late and the urgency is there to get a deal done, I think there's too much money to be left on the table for both sides to not come to an agreement.
Yeah, like absolutely. Like we kind of knew like when there's gonna be a lockdown coming over the last 2 weeks. We knew when it was coming, but we just didn't know exactly what happened. We were basically lucky enough that we made it kind of this far without a lockdown. Like we were lucky, and so like between like it sinks for me. The hardest part is like not seeing the signings. Like Clayton Kershaw hasn't signed yet, and like we're lucky to see some signings like Max Scherzer to the Mets, like Corey Seager to the Rangers, and some other big signings. And so right before basically the lockdown hit a couple months ago. But like, what do you kind of expect like the next couple of months the MLB will do like in terms of the lockdown and signings and all that?
I mean, I think once it ends, we're gonna see a logistical nightmare if you actually work for a team and in like an administrative role, because you are gonna have to figure out how to compact a spring training schedule, most likely, if this stalemate runs through the start of spring training. You're going to probably have a shortened, a truncated spring training schedule, and you're going to have to figure out the logistics of getting foreign players, their visas to come over here. And then, I mean, you still have more than half of your offseason planning in terms of actual player personnel that you probably have to figure out. So what we saw just before the lockout, that free agent frenzy for about a week's time, you may double that feeling coming out of this lockout, depending on how much time we're going to have between the time where maybe a new CBA is agreed to toward and the start of spring training. What we saw, all that excitement, it was very much like what the start of NFL free agency is like, the start of NBA free agency is like, same thing with hockey. You're probably going to see a double dose of that compared to what we saw in early December.
Yeah, absolutely. Like as a free agent, like free agency, basically any type of sport is probably like the most interesting part of the off season is the signings and everything.
True. Yeah, and I mean, you have free. Sorry to cut you off. You have free agency, and then you're going to have a bunch of trades as well. That's another part of all this. It's not just free agency here. You're going to have so many trades that, look, during this time, I know it's frowned upon, it's not allowed, but a lot of these front office executives throughout the league, they're finding ways to communicate with one another, maybe through some back channels and stuff. And I would be surprised if there weren't already some deals in place. And once the CBA is agreed to, you're going to see these trades become official and GMs are going to just start unloading. And it's going to be a lot of fun whenever we get there.
Yeah, absolutely. Like back in the last couple of years before even lockdown happened, there was so many free agent signings, like almost every day trades. Like something that hit me the most was a trade Dodgers and Red Sox, like Mookie Betts was traded to the Dodgers for Alex Verdugo. And wait, I forget what else we traded, but we got Mookie Betts.
I think it was Jeter Downs because
Jeter
it was
Downs.
it was a big story of how the Red Sox were able to get someone named Jeter. Yeah, and there were other pieces, I believe, to that trade. Don't quote me, but I remember Jeter Downs being in there too.
Yeah, I feel like we got another player from the Red Sox, but I can't think of top of my head at the moment.
Oh yeah,
And
David Price. David, that's
yeah,
it.
David
Yeah.
Price. Yeah, David Price. And so, like, I remember that trade. Like, it was yesterday, basically.
Hmm.
I actually met Alex Verdugo a couple of weeks before. Before the trade even happened, like before we ever heard about it.
Hmm.
And so, I met him at Fan Fest, after Fan Fest and stuff. And I met him a couple months ago, back in July and stuff. And he's becoming such like a big kind of big part of my life. Like I met him a couple of times over the last couple, like almost like 3 years now. I met him a couple of times, and we kind of grew a good bond since we got like I met him so many times and stuff. But like, what was kind of the trade that kind of hit you? Like what trade kind of hit you? That was like why did they make this trade, or why did they even do this trade or like a sign?
You mean from the last few years, or from maybe when I was growing up as a fan?
Oh, last couple of years.
Last couple of years. Let me think then. I mean, oh, that's a tough one. Well, I think the trade, and look, I come from a Yankee background. I work for the team. I grew up a Yankee fan. I would say the trade that has brought up the most questions and perhaps second guesses in the eyes of some was the trade where they acquired Giancarlo Stanton from the Marlins at the very end of 2017, December of 2017. And you look at it in a vacuum now, and on I should say on the surface, first of all, people say, wow, look at that contract. So long, so much money. Well, hey, fast forward 4 years or so, the Marlins are on the hook for a decent sized chunk of the money. Giancarlo Stanton's average annual value isn't that much compared to what we're seeing players earn annually these days. I mean, when you have players earning 40 million annually, Giancarlo Stanton, who I think, right now is only bringing in, around 20 million annually. So it's not something that is going to cripple you with your collective, your collective bargaining tax, but it's the years. And slowly but surely, he's had his peaks and valleys in New York. A lot of people thought it wasn't a necessary move, but hey, Giancarlo Stanton, you can't argue the type of season he had in 2021. He stayed healthy. He, I believe, is one of the very few players who has been able to prove himself in a place like New York without winning a championship. Obviously, to completely dispel that stigma and that cliche, that perception of him from some fans is, yeah, you need a championship, but I think he did enough, especially over this past season in 2021, to show that, hey, I can handle this market, because unlike so many other players, he has to deal with that constant scrutiny of, oh, you are one of the higher paid players. Your contract is that large. What are you doing in order to make that look like a coup for your club? Are you living up to that deal? Are you maybe exceeding expectations? He has to kind of answer those questions every single day since he's arrived in the Bronx. And I think he's finally starting to win some people over. And everything he does in his approach, he's a hard worker. He shows up early. I think he's been terrific with the media. So I would say that trade is something that you're going to continue to be able to dissect for years to come. And it really hasn't stopped slowing down ever since they actually pulled the trigger with the Marlins at the end of 2017.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So as you kind of since you like work for the Yankees and stuff, but you're also a digital host and reporter for the New York Yankees. What is it like for you to work and report for the Yankees?
It's awesome. I mean, my office is Yankee Stadium for half the year. It's terrific. I love driving into New York and into the Bronx, and going the same way that I drove with my family to games growing up. It really is a pinch me drive every single time, and I try to always put it in perspective, never take it for granted. And coming out of 2020, when I didn't work, and there was no need because there wasn't much content to be shot, games were being held with empty stadiums, no fans were there. coming back for 2021, it was emotional. And again, it proved to me just how much I love doing what I do. It's terrific though. Like I said, I get a free seat in the house and get paid to watch the Yankees play baseball every single day. So it beats working for a living.
Yeah, nothing's really better than that since like 2020 was a 60 game season due to pandemic and they had to do a month a couple weeks out of spring training. It was a couple like at their own stadiums. It wasn't like a regular spring training due to pandemic. And so like it was a different type of game since it was based like it was since the pandemic it changed really that much. Like it changed a lot.
Yeah, and there was a lot of uncertainty too. We didn't know what some of our statuses were for that season because we didn't know how they were going to proceed with that season. 2020 was rough. Not, and you read about the negotiations to play through a pandemic between the league and the players. 2020, when you think about that and how baseball fell on the sports calendar, stadium workers, people who work for the teams in administrative roles, so many parking attendants. I mean, a lot of people that you probably don't think about every day were massively affected, I should say. And they lost a lot of money, lost a lot of income. It was tough. And that uncertainty sort of bled into 2021. And thank goodness, everything was able to get resolved. Things slowly transitioned back to normal. And now we just kind of have to wait for the chips to fall with another work stoppage, but in a very different form with the CBA needing to be renewed.
Yeah, absolutely. Like since we've been trying to see what the Players Association and MLB plan is for the new season, since we kind of basically all knew what's gonna happen. And so like with the 60-game season, like no fans were allowed due to pandemic. Like there's no one allowed to go to the games or inside the stadiums. And so that was really difficult on my end, basically, because I was basically going to at least a couple of games a year, even for like the Phillies, Dodgers, or any team that's kind of in town. And so I was basically I'm basically off of a baseball lifestyle. Like used to go to games, a couple of games each year. And so like I had 60 stadium, 60 games and no fans allowed in the stadium. I was like, what am I going to do? How am I supposed to watch this at home? Wow, I can't go to games. How is this even possible? And so like during like the end of the season, like playoffs and World Series and all that, they started allowing fans in. The cases going low, which I'm happy. Like last year, they will go to a couple of games. Like because I remember like when I went to my first game, like, it was Phillies against the Red Sox. And so in Philadelphia, and I remember being like emotional and being like, I never felt this happy.
Yeah, I was going to say, what was it like going back into the stadium for, at that point, probably close to 2 years, right?
Yeah, it was almost like 2 years. Yeah. So like I went with my dad and one of my friends. And so like I wanted to see Alex Verdugo, Kike Hernandez play. Like they were both my all-time favorite players. I met Alex Verdugo back there as well. And so like I remember like getting there and remember being emotional because I was like, I haven't been inside the stadium for almost 2 years.
Yep.
And I'm like, it was like the happiest I ever felt. Like I just remember being so emotional and happy to be back at the stadium. And like it's just something like you just like felt like you're seeing someone for the first time in a long time.
Mm-hmm. It's that familiarity of the sights, the colors, the smells, all that stuff. It just triggers something. It triggers a level of happiness that is really special. And I think that's what got me from a young age, probably when I was even younger than you are now. And for whatever reason, I decided to be a little bold, a little unique, and try to make a career out of it. So it's an amazing feeling, and I hope we get back to it soon here in 2022.
Yeah, absolutely. So did you kind of expect yourself to be a reporter for a sports team, or is it something that it will be like a great opportunity to kind of take?
I mean, I knew I wanted to work in television when I graduated high school. I actually took a TV production class in my high school, and my TV teacher, he told me about a sports broadcasting camp that was held at a local college. And I thought, do I really want to go to a sports broadcasting camp? Okay. It was run by Ian Eagle, who's one of the best play-by-play announcers in the business right now. He calls the NFL on CBS. He calls Brooklyn Net games on the Yes Network. He's, one of the voices of tennis on CBS, calls all the major tournaments. And it was also run by Bruce Beck, who is one of the best ever New York sports anchors on the NBC affiliate in New York City. And I went for a week, and my world was just turned upside down. I was bit so hard because of what they were teaching me, what they were telling me, what the business was like. And from that moment, I knew that's the path I wanted to go down. And I concentrated that in college. I worked a lot at my school's radio station. I spent more time at the Fordham University radio station than I did in my dorm or my off-campus apartment. And when I graduated college, I hit the road. I called minor league baseball on the radio for my first 5 years out of school. It took me to some really interesting places in the country, places down south, in Mobile, Alabama, Knoxville, Tennessee, places I would have probably never visited if it wasn't for baseball. And I also were able to start a lot of relationships within the game through minor league baseball. Shortly thereafter, I came back to New York City, working several gigs, and ultimately each job leads to another, and eventually led me to a job with the Yankees. And it's incredible because when I graduated college, my current role with the Yankees wasn't in existence. So a lot of people say, what's your biggest piece of advice for some young people trying to get started in this industry? I always say, obviously, be kind, never say no, but try extremely hard to always have an open mind, because you never know what an opportunity that's in your face presently can lead to tomorrow. Because like I said, never in my imagination would I have thought that I'd be doing this type of work when I was in school, because it didn't exist. So you just never know what's on the horizon. And I've been fortunate enough to work for the Yankees in this capacity for the last 5 seasons or so. It led to me to doing some fill-in reporting work on the Yes Network during Yankee broadcasts. And ultimately, it led to me starting a podcast with David Cohn on John Boy Media, because I see David Cohn so often at Yankee Stadium. And we've been able to build a friendship. And one day back in 2021, I asked him if he wanted to start a podcast with me, a pitching podcast. And that's how it started. So like I said, everything kind of leads to another. You just never know what's around the corner.
Yeah, absolutely. Like if I picture myself a couple years back, I would never thought ever that I would start a podcast, because I was this shy, independent, scared little kid. I was always scared and had a bunch of anxiety, and so I was scared to do a lot of things. And so I was like, okay, in terms of me, I'm every time I try something new, I usually quit very quickly in terms of things. I don't,
Mhm.
a lot of things are not for me, I'll say. And so when I started this year, I interviewed some of my favorite people ever. I never pictured myself ever interviewing some of my favorite people in the industry, or in some people in sports. I've interviewed Madison Watkins, Kenyon Waves, some other people that have been my favorites for a long time in terms of singing and acting, all those things. And I have a friend I had on early on when I first started. He plays in the minor leagues with the Phillies. He plays for I think the Iron Pigs right now. He plays for Iron Pigs.
Okay. In
I had
Allentown.
a
Yeah.
friend that I met down at spring training last year before even COVID hit. I met him down there and became some good friends after that. But it's that's what's good about it. It's you never kind of picture yourself doing it. Sometimes you just don't picture yourself being in this exact kind of position.
That's the beauty of life. And you're going to learn that more and more as you get older. And I think an important lesson, I think, for any young person out there, as early as you can, right? Start getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. If you're in a brand new position, embrace it. See what happens. Get your feet wet. Worst case scenario, you don't like it and you know not to go back in that direction. But you may discover something new about yourself. You may discover something that is new and that you like, and it could open up a whole new world for you. So it's really important. I always think that start getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. Every new situation, you're a little uncomfortable. It's new. It's human nature. But if you can adapt and at least give it a shot, right? Open your mind to new things, you're going to be in really good shape. You're going to be a really well-rounded person.
Absolutely. So do you have anyone that you look up to as a host reporter, or just kind of in general? Do you have anyone that you look up to?
Yeah, I mean, in the business, in terms of talent and just, learning a craft and admiring their work like that, ironically, not even sports related, but Ryan Seacrest is someone that I really admire. His work is something, I really admire his ability to do what he does in a live setting. I don't think there is any broadcaster living today that handles live television better than Ryan Seacrest. He's so calm, so comfortable and natural on camera. It's as if he's just operating, thinking that the camera's not even there. And he's done it for so long. I was telling you, I think before we started the interview, how cool it is that you're able to do a podcast like this from your house, right? And I didn't have something like that when I was younger. But Ryan Seacrest, when he was young, back in the 80s and the early 90s, he kind of like built a TV station in his basement. And that involves a lot of work back in those days and for a young kid. So he knew he really wanted to do something like in terms of what he's doing today. He knew he wanted to do something that's super relatable to what he's currently doing. I think it's great. I think he's a terrific broadcaster. I always look for little things, how he carries himself on camera and just overall staying comfortable. In terms of sports, I mentioned Ian Eagle's name before. I think he's one of the best, if not the best, play-by-play announcers out there. And I just think he knows how to get the most out of the people that he works with. I love interviewing. So there are a lot of people that I definitely admire from afar. Holly Rowe is one of them. I think she's a terrific sideline reporter. I think a lot of people kind of just dismiss the role of sideline reporting in sports broadcasting today. Well, you know what? If you're doing it right, there's a lot of value in the position. And Holly Rowe definitely does it right. She asks a lot of great questions. She knows how to get her interview subjects comfortable and build that trust. She's terrific at that. Lauren Shahadi is a baseball reporter. She does a terrific job doing that as well. And what's really impressive about her is that she doesn't do it so often. She kind of just does it in the postseason. But if you watch her interact with some players right after a game when she does the on-field interview, she does a terrific job asking very simple but thought-provoking questions that gets the best answers out of any player. And then overall, just kind of navigating as a reporter. From my baseball experiences, I really admire the way Ken Rosenthal goes about his work, because, before pandemic times, reporters were allowed inside the clubhouses for an hour every day before each game. There are a lot of people that kind of just stand around aimlessly without a sense of purpose in the clubhouse. And I never wanted to be that person, because you're in someone else's space. But when Ken Rosenthal is on site and he's doing it, he's working the room and he's taking advantage of every single minute that's afforded to the media during that clubhouse hour, whether he's talking to someone like Aaron Judge or whether he's talking to the 26th man on the roster. He knows exactly what he needs to do. And it's really admirable to watch him go about his business.
Yeah, absolutely. Like he's like one of the best to kind of ever do it, especially in terms of baseball.
Mhm.
And so one of the people I absolutely adore in terms of baseball and reporting is Alana Rizzo. She previously worked for the Dodgers. She
Mhm.
does it sometimes for MLB Network and many other things. I adore her as well. She's like some of my inspirations as like a journalist and what she does. And I also like Ellen Pompeo. Has her own podcast of her own. She's an actress. She played in like Grey's Anatomy, Meredith Grey, and like she keeps inspiring me with my podcast, and she's the reason why I keep doing this. Because if it wasn't for her podcast, like I wouldn't be here. Like if it wasn't for inspirations, and also Courtney Turner, Justin Turner's wife. Like she has her
Okay.
own podcast. She has with her and her husband Justin Turner, their baseman for Dodgers. She's amazing as well. I love her podcast as well. Like, there's so many people I can name in terms of podcasting, journalism. There's many, but there's too much to name personally.
Yeah, I think the important thing to do, especially if it's something you want to pursue down the road, find one of those people that you really admire, tell them, right? And explain why you admire them. And then ask point blank, would you mind being a mentor to me? You know, and cultivate that relationship. It's so important to know a lot of people in any industry, but especially something like the broadcasting industry, it is all who you know. I mean, that you have to have talent, but the other half of it is knowing the right people. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's just the way life works. It's the way the world works. And if you're able to cultivate those relationships, have mentors, you're going to be in a great spot. And it's always good to tell the people that you admire just that you admire their work, that they're doing something right. It's going to make them feel good. And you're going to get more out of what you admire by expressing yourself that way.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree on that. So the final question for the interview is: if you weren't a reporter for the Yankees, which team would you like to report for?
Which team? Okay, so it's pretty unconventional because I'm thinking broadly, and I'm a big Serie A fan, Italian soccer, and I like Napoli down on on the coast of southern Italy. So because of that, it would mean I would be able to live in southern Italy, by Positano and Napoli and all that stuff. So yeah, I would definitely take Napoli soccer. If you're talking about the four major North American sports, like I'm assuming you are, I would probably take the New York Rangers. I'm a big Ranger fan. It's hockey is one of the sports that I've never covered professionally, and I like that because I can really enjoy them as a fan, and I do during the off season. But heck, if I could work for them, and cover a team that way, especially during the winter months, I feel like it would make the cold weather and the winter months go by a lot quicker. And then you have free summers as well. So I think it would be the Rangers.
Yeah, absolutely. Like if I didn't cover for the Dodgers, it would really be the Seahawks, probably if I had to
Okay.
choose. Because I've been a Seahawks fan for a couple of years now, so probably
Mhm.
either the Dodgers or the Seahawks either one for me.
Yeah,
Mhm.
in terms of the small details that kind of add up, in terms of being a team reporter, the NFL teams do it right with how they have their digital presence and how a reporter is worked into the overall goal with an NFL team. So there's only 32 of those jobs out there, and they're evolving at a great rate. And it's impressive of the work and the type of content that those NFL team reporters are putting out. It's like the equivalent of, my job, but the NFL, the way their websites are laid out and stuff like that, they just have a huge presence on their websites, and it's really impressive to see how it's taken off the last several years. So I would probably also say an NFL reporter job for a team is pretty enticing.
Yeah, for sure. Since it's like very important since there's not a lot of
Mhm.
female reporters out there in sports. Like there's a lot of men, and so there's always good for more female reporters. Absolutely. But
100%.
I just want to thank you so much for coming on my podcast. It was amazing talking to you. You're amazing. And I just want to thank you so much for coming on, and let's speak soon. Thank you so much for coming on.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Kylie. I appreciate it. I had fun.
Of course. Thank you so much.